Hi everyone, welcome innovators and changemakers. Welcome to the premiere of the Purple Podcast by GELLIFY. I'm Neil Ford, your host and curator of all things innovation. Together, we're going to embark on an exhilarating expedition into the realms of digital transformation and disruptive thinking. As we navigate the intersections of technology, strategy, creativity, and the rest, prepare to unlock the hidden gems that will propel your business to new heights. Join me as we embrace the Purple Revolution and ignite a wave of innovation that will reshape the world as we know it. Let the journey begin. Welcome and thanks for joining us today. One of the things that we're really interested in at GELLIFY Middle East is customer insights and experience design. We believe that customer insights should be at the forefront and the base of every project, whether it is a product, a solution, a way of working. And today I'd like to actually drill down on that in a little bit more detail. And joining me in the studio today, I have two experts, and they're two experts that come at it from a very different way, but I'll let them explain about that a little bit more. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Susana, who is an expert on corporate innovation. Susana, who is joining us from Madrid, could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hey, Neil, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I am a psychologist and a strategic designer by formation. So I did both degrees back in Colombia. So back then, I really wanted to explore as much as possible both the world of clinical psychology and the world of strategic design, right? So I did my first job was in clinical psychology research. Then I did a big turn towards design and joined the advertising world. And there I realized that my real passion was definitely innovation because it has a way of perfectly combining both my areas of interest. So innovation involves both the understanding of the human being as to making transformation, well, relevant and meaningful for society, but it also needs the strategic design aspect as to make the transformation actually relevant, realizable, structured, and as accurate as possible, right? So then I did a master's here in Madrid in customer experience and innovation at IE University. And then I finally started the job I have today, which is at GELLIFY as an innovation strategy consultant for the Iberian office. Okay, so the human-centered design, basically, this approach has been a very key part of my formation and my professional life. I have worked in all kinds of projects across many geographies, and I strongly believe that true innovation involves a high degree of empathy and human understanding that can only be gathered while working very closely to the customer.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So we have on the one side this corporate innovation expert, and then on the other, I thought it'd be interesting today to talk to Ale. Ale comes at it from a very different perspective, or maybe the same, I'm not sure. Ale, you are actually an interior designer. If you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yes, thank you so much for having me today. In fact, this is very exciting for me because I do bring a different perspective to the conversation. Today, I furnish and style homes. I'm an interior designer. I'm a native creative. I've always worked in various different creative industries. I worked in a wedding agency in Barcelona, in a marble company in Italy, in a brand communication agency in Germany. And when I moved to Dubai, I joined Altair Retail, and that's where we met, Neil. So even though I was initially always in the creative industry, during the digital transformation in 2016, I had the opportunity to move into a digital department. That is when I added a layer of change management onto my skill set. And when I started to kind of approach innovation and the digital world from a people point of view. So, before or even today, everything centers around what does the customer want? And with my change hat on, I can totally see it where it's coming from. And I'm excited to be here today with you to talk about how important customer insights are and what we can eventually learn from one another and how to do things better and differently.
I'm really looking forward to it as well, because I think from a corporate perspective, we have a way of doing things historically that that really doesn't actually do the best for the customer. You know, we don't understand them enough. We don't design our products and our solutions and our processes for them enough. And I think as we move forward, we can't continue to do that. I think it's fundamental that we really understand the customer's viewpoint and what they actually need and want. With that in mind, Susana, I'm keen to get your thoughts, and maybe you can describe for our audience what customer insights is from a GELLIFY perspective and from a corporate point of view, and what customer insights and experience design can do for our clients.
Absolutely. So insight and experience design is basically an approach to develop and ideate solutions to problems, to actual real problems, by involving the customer's perspective in all steps of the problem solving process. Okay, so I think the most important thing to understand about it is that it is more of a way of looking at design and business, right? It's kind of more of a perspective rather than a specific methodology. So it is about how corporates and companies and brands make their customers the central key point when developing new solutions and bringing them to the market. So it's therefore making sure that these new solutions are tailor-made to meet people's real needs and wants. So as I said, it's really about a mindset, and a very relevant one today. I remember, for example, a survey that Edelman did, the communication firm in Europe, and they did like this survey across, I think it was 15 countries some years back, and their results showed that more than 60% of customers today truly believe that they have the power to force brands to change. And nearly 80% of them want to actually make use or exert that power on brands to make society better. So just this example shows how involved people really want to be in the co-designing of services and products of the brands that are so important in their daily lives today. So brands need to give them this space and this opportunity to do so in order to maintain themselves relevant. It isn't about just asking your customer about their perspective. Now it is about actively involving and co-designing with your customer the products and services of the future, and this needs to be very much considered by the corporates.
Absolutely. Okay, so Ale, maybe you could take us through. I mean, you come at it from a very pure perspective. Your starting point is probably different because I would imagine in most cases the customer is coming to you. It's not as if you're going to their house and saying, "Hello, you need to have something done here." Maybe if you could just talk us through what process that you go from a pure design perspective and how you incorporate the customer into the end product.
Yeah. It starts, obviously, as you just said, that the customer comes to me. So they're either moving into a new home or building a new home, and they know they need help. So that's already something which is almost putting me in a position where I help them to make something better. Then, obviously, it starts with a very honest and authentic conversation. Especially my niche in furnishing and styling, it's a very personal conversation and having with them, very private. We talk about what do they do when they walk into their home. We talk about where are all of their belongings going. So conversations I'm having with them are very authentic and very tailor-made to the customer. And I ask questions about their favorite colors, and I ask things they actually don't like. Mm-hmm. And with their answers, that's when I start building the design for them. Now, what does happen a lot, of course, is they're seeing a picture on Pinterest or on Architectural Digest or whatnot. So, we need to consider that we have a very well-informed customer and they do somehow know what they want. But then it is my job to guide them into what is actually possible within their four walls.
Okay.
And help them basically get as close as possible to their vision, but also help them understand that we're not going to just replicate that. We're not just going to throw that solution at them.
Yeah.
We're going to make it custom-made to them and working with the client along the way. Like if I work on a project which lasts 2 months, I would say every second day I have a conversation with the customer about it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's a few points that stand out to me there immediately around the way that you're having those conversations and eliciting that understanding from them, the way that you're framing the art of possible within the context of your surroundings and their rooms and what they actually want versus maybe what is feasible or viable, and then actually keeping up that conversation. Susana, maybe you could talk us through the concepts of gathering those customer insights and why it's important to maybe mirror what it is that Ella is doing in this one-to-one conversation and these open-ended questions, and maybe try and understand that from a corporate perspective. Could you maybe take us through that?
The thing with the corporate world is that listening to your customer, it's a bit more, it involves a more complex process, in the sense that you have first, so the customer, you are not receiving one customer at a time, right? As Ale is explaining. So you have to understand multiple perspectives and insights and context at the same time, right? Because you're working with a much broader audience, and therefore you need to be sensible enough in order to extract patterns of behavior that direct your knowledge towards the right path. So you need to actually actively have conversations with many more people at the same time, and therefore identify what are the patterns of perspectives, of opinions, and basically problems and challenges, right?
Yeah.
So and the customers are asking for this to happen, just not as directly and actively as they do for Ali.
So do we need to guide the customers then a little bit in terms of the types of information we're trying to understand from them? It's not just, right, yes or no, you need a new product, right? It's we drill down a little bit, right? We ask those difficult questions, sometimes the uncomfortable questions.
Well, absolutely. We need to be very sensible. I mean, we also need to get into those empathetic conversations. It's just with more people and with very different type of people, right? So you're asking these very deep and personalized and important questions to many types of profiles, of contexts, of situations, and therefore you need to consider them all, right? But be strategic enough to identify what are the critical points that are similar to everyone. Basically, I think that's the most important challenge, or what makes the insight gathering in the corporate world a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think your filtering process needs to be much deeper. I mean, from my time at retail, when I was doing change management projects, we were trying to move masses. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 employees across regions. How do you do that? Ultimately, at least the methodology I have learned, it comes down to an individual. Because we all know an individual, after all, is, they are selfish. Everyone just wants what's in it for me. That's important. So even when you're trying to obviously target a much bigger audience, as you said, Susana, I know it's not as simple then as having this one client in front of you. But I think there is still merit to consider an individual opinion and then see how that can almost be volumized.
I'm curious with that, Ale, as well. How do you stop your own bias coming in? Because I'm sure you must come into a room and go, oh, I think this would be amazing. And then maybe a client shows you, I want that one. I want this. And you could sit there and go, well, that's amazing. Or alternatively, you could sit there and go, well, that's the wrong decision. So how do you remove your bias in this kind of conversation? Can you remove your own bias?
I think you can. I mean, for me, it obviously comes with experience. In my world, it is not about my taste. It's about the customer's taste. Okay. And it's about what they want. So, I've worked for a lot of different luxury brands, and it was never about what I like. It was always about a brand guideline there and then. And with my expertise, taking that brand guideline, but translating it into the perfect design. So I think even in the corporate world, it's obviously never about someone's opinion. These are all experts. Susana is an expert, so you are capable of kind of your opinion almost doesn't matter, but your expertise matters, and the facts you have and the amount of times you've done this, that matters. So almost like it's not about you, it is about them. And going back to the customer, if you just make them feel that it's about them, sometimes they don't notice how you just, kind of switch something as well, because often they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
So you're there to guide them. And you just need to understand their vision, but then take your expertise and translating it in what's achievable and what makes sense as well.
So Susana,
I also, just to add to that, I also think that there's a very good way of making sure that you're not biased in these kinds of process, and it's basically the question of why. The more times you ask the question of why, the deeper you get into the real reasons why people feel how they feel and what they need. And when you do understand those internal reasons, then you are much more keen to step away, because they're talking to you in a very personal way. So this kind of process of asking why helps a lot to maintain to understand the real reasons, and therefore think more about the other person rather than yourself.
Absolutely.
I think that's a...
So to me, it sounds conceptually like you're talking about having a customer as a co-creator, right? Everything that you do is having this end user front and center of the product or solution or process that you're designing for. How can you make that customer a co-creator in an ongoing fashion? Can we, and I would imagine in a design sense, you might get callbacks, and you can go in and redo things and progress things as your customers become recurring clients. Can we do that in the corporate world as well, Susana? Do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you made that question, because it takes me back a bit to a specific word that Ali was mentioning that I think it's crucial, and it's the methodology, right? So the problem with corporates is that often they are a bit afraid of the complexity of these processes, right? Of understanding so many perspectives and so many opinions in a such personal way. So they decide that it's better to work with assumptions instead, or data that is not sufficiently customer driven or empathetic. So when we talk about the corporate world, we definitely need to talk about structure, right? And what gives you structure is the methodology. So you definitely need to implement systematic ways of gathering information that comes directly from the customers. How? Well, it depends on the project, the strategy that you have as a company, the nature of your business, the nature of your customer base, etc. So there is an important need to evaluate all these elements and understand them in order to put the right effort in a systematic way and methodology in the right order, right? So the methodology point of view here is crucial in order to have a planned process where you can actually gather this information in a constant manner.
Because at some stage as well, you've got to take these learnings, these pain areas that the customer wants to change, and turn those into design, right? New ideas. How do you do that from a design perspective, Ali?
Well, I just wanted to add to Susana as well, because it's no different in my world today. As I was saying, you might show me a picture of what you actually like, but it is my job to break it down and how to get there. So I think that's crucial in every world. There is a big vision, and there is a starting point, and there are people in between who are overwhelmed. So, being able to simplify, to break it down, to create different chunks, different processes, different ways of making it also digestible for them. Because I think that's also important. Because if you throw everything at them at one time, everyone gets overwhelmed. It's like, oh my God, there's much more work than I thought. So it's good to have, people like you who are capable of saying, no worry, I know it sounds massive, but I'm going to help you get there. So step 1, step 2, step 3.
It's a process.
It's a process. And to go back to your initial question and how can you make your customer part of this along the way, I think the customer just needs to be a constant. We're in a podcast now, so I'm just drawing this line, this vertical line from left to right, because you gotta create a system for yourself which allows you to tap into your customers whenever you need that. You might have sometimes big questions, but then every now and then go back and check your thinking. Because it's not always just this initial conversation, then an analysis coming out and results coming out. You can get sidetracked along the way. So, I think creating a system for yourself, and every industry is different, of how you can constantly touch base with your customer, that they're just almost always a co-creator for you, that would be wonderful.
Yep. So I think
Until
fundamentally,
it's
yeah. Well, we'll come on to that. But realistically, you're talking about a concept that says, right, if we do a project, we finish a project, but we shouldn't just go, halas, we're done. We walk away and then it's finished. This should be an iterative process where the customer is continually, whatever cadence that is, touched into. And maybe you have a group of super customers that you can touch base with, that you can create as a corporate. That touch point and ongoing activity, I think, is really key.
Yeah. I must even say, like, from an interior design point of view, obviously, I source furniture in all of these stores here. They have created a network for us designers to constantly get feedback from us as well, because we are their most important customer, because we keep on coming back. Usually, I do one house, one design. I mean, if I have a very, very rich client who has properties across the world, then it would become more recurrent. But what these furniture stores are really doing is they are constantly inviting us, let that be for a breakfast, or they're sending us new product, or they're calling us in for like a fireside chat to understand what is it that the design world is going towards, and what do we feel they need to add into their assortment from a product point of view. So I think it's very interesting, the position I'm in, because in one hand I'm designing and I have an end customer. On the other hand, I'm also the source for like a store or a corporation to give feedback and to be available.
That's really interesting. I mean, you're talking about an industry that maybe lends itself or understands the design process a little bit more, but maybe that doesn't come as naturally to, say, a services industry or a bank or finance or something like that. But I think the principles apply just the same, right? If we do this correctly, customers should be part of this process and be constantly tapped into.
Mm-hmm. And they love that. Let's not forget, I mean, it's all about themselves. They love to be asked and invited, and, I'm sure you work with amazing brands, and you might be even able to give them a service for free or a product for free or whatnot. I think there is such an opportunity to have them as co-creators, how you were mentioning at the beginning,
And I would imagine in that instance, they become advocates and ambassadors, right, for the brand.
Exactly. Absolutely. I do agree absolutely that the principles are the same, in the sense that in the end, this is about leveraging the knowledge and expertise of the people that are ultimately affected by your product or service, right? And involving them in the process of responding to their own needs and problems is absolutely key, because no one knows better about what they need than themselves. So you are designing, in the end, you are designing always for them. It is about them, as Ale was saying. So no assumption or generalization or whatever insight you might think you will have before asking them will ever be able to compete with what they actually know about themselves. So the ways of doing this might change, obviously, because the nature of Ali's business is different from the corporate world. There are several methodologies, processes, practices, but in the end, I do think that the principles are the same in terms of just bringing the customer-centric approach into your DNA and never stop thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is there then a concept of too much customer? At which point does the customer become this great fountain of knowledge to the problem child? So I would imagine, Ale, in your world, there's been a few instances of that.
Yes, yes, there have. I mean, let's not forget, obviously, in today's world, the customer is very informed.
Mhm.
Okay, so if I think back about retail and, when we were working in all of these change programs together, we had built systems around the fact that the customer actually walks into store and knows exactly what they want. So by a click of a button or by just simply seeing that customer, how easy is it to kind of get the customer what they want? So they do know what they want, but obviously in my world, they do come to me because they don't know how to get there. And sometimes they have a vision, but then they think they know, and they kind of forget why they asked you in the first place. And that's when it just gets tricky, because ultimately I'm the expert and I know what I'm talking about, and I need to get given the space to allow me to do my job. If there was a project, it ended up horrendously because it was, I mean, there were multiple factors, and I think that can be translated into the corporate world as well. There was obviously no clear budget definition from the beginning. The brief that was given was today this, tomorrow that. There were too many revisions. And ultimately, there was too much decision power given to the client as well, so that the red through line of how do we get from A to B was completely blurred. And it ended up being a home which the wife thought it would be one thing, and then the husband, who didn't want to be involved from the first place, came in and then didn't like it. And I end up, after 6 weeks of work, ripping down everything, like installing, and then a week later ripping it all down. And that was it. But I think for me, there are two things. So number one, allow yourself, like asking the customer is great, but know when enough is enough. And then the second thing, and that happens today in my world, and I remember in retail it happened as well, get the right stakeholders in at the right time. Because if the ones who are ultimately taking decisions, or the ones who are paying the bill, if they're not evolved from the right from the beginning, then you might fail it simply from their perspective.
Yep.
Because you haven't included them, or they didn't want to be included. So find a way of doing that, because that was clearly a failure in my project. Too much customer, and the one who pays wasn't involved enough.
So I think probably from a corporate perspective, Susana, we've seen examples of this before, right? We focus that the customer is wonderful. They have a vision maybe of what they want, but we are there to help corporates take that vision and create something correctly, right? Because the customer on their own can't do it. Maybe the corporate on their own can't do it. So maybe if you could just take us through how we could apply that from a corporate side, Susana.
Yeah, the thing is, I think that when it comes to corporate world, this is when having this complex mix of perspectives and context pays off, right? Because when very different from Ali, when you have the possibility to contrast between different inputs and people, you can identify patterns, right? So they could be patterns of behavior, of thought, of action, that allow you to differentiate the critical information from the noisy or the or maybe the irrelevant one. Because let's not forget, we are still talking to human beings, right? So they're contradictory, and they forget things, and they're maybe sometimes too subjective, so they see the small picture. So we have to take this into account, and a very good way of doing that is just being able to understand in a very individualized way when you are gathering the insights, but also be able to see the big picture, to distance yourself a bit and see the big picture in order to deliver to your client or the corporate the actually most important and relevant information that affects the most people. I think that's
So how
a
do
way
we
to put it.
determine then what is good and what's bad? Is it again, does it go back to the process?
Absolutely. I think it goes to the process, and there's a very important word that you already mentioned, that is iteration, right? So this is the key point here is having an iterative process in nature. So innovation and design are all about being able to accumulate real-time learnings and adjust your knowledge and the process accordingly. So with this, don't get me wrong, I don't mean losing the structural basis of whichever methodology you are using in the empathetic process, because you obviously need a structure to move forward. But when it comes to this kind of doing design, you do need to constantly leave space in each step, like plan space in each step, to ask new questions, right? Go back, reformulate, ask why again, adapt, and then keep moving forward in order to get to the real insights that you're looking for and that are absolutely critical. So this is what makes your research and your project unique, and what allows you to identify like the most meaningful insights that are almost always hidden behind the first attempt of doing things. Right? So this is like you need to not be afraid of involving your customer once and again and once and again, and asking new questions, confirm old ones, and reconstruct your knowledge in order to to pinpoint on the exact information that is the most relevant, and that it's not like bad,
Yeah.
as you put it.
I also think like a question I always ask, or, in the design world, we say design follows function. So, the first question is always, how are you intending to use this space? So even if you translate that into like a system technology or a solution, which you are maybe, or which the client maybe wants to introduce, it must always be not just that solution. It's not just, I just want a nice space. Even in my world, that doesn't help me.
Some level of brief around it, right?
There needs to be some level of brief, and how are you intending to use this space, and what are you trying to do in this space? I mean, in my world, also going back to the empathetic side of it, how do you like to feel in this space? And I know that in the corporate world, you're not going to have these conversations drilled down to their emotions, but I do believe, like you just said, Susana, there is an opportunity to just make a little bit of space for such conversations, and then obviously combined with a nice structure, because eventually you need to move forward. And that brings us back to what we said initially. How do you guide that customer, right? Like, how do you move them from A to B at a certain timeline within a certain budget, and then ultimately, giving them that solution which they were aiming for at the beginning.
Yeah.
I in terms of that, in terms of what you were saying, Ali, about how much do customers really know what they want? I think the real question is how often do they know more about what they want and need than us, or as designers or innovators? And for me, the answer is always, because people might sometimes not know how to pinpoint exactly what they want, but they are always the way to get you there. So even if they don't still know what the kind of information they need to give you, they are the way to get you there. And to going back to your point, I think this is where our expertise really becomes so relevant, because when you understand your offering so well, when you understand your audience so well, your process, your methodology, your research, then you start to get very good at knowing what are the important questions to ask, right? When is it time to go deeper? When is it time to move forward, or just stop, or maybe go back even? So here you can use different tools, like empathetic data gathering. You have personas, you have build heat maps, you have empathy maps. But the thing is, with this expertise, you start to recognize which are the better tools to work effectively with your customer as a team member, in order to make them bring you to the real information of value, even if they don't know yet which one that is, but guide them into giving you the right information that you need.
Yeah. Often they don't even know, like, I get asked, why are you asking me all these questions? So they don't know what their answers are actually doing for you. And I think that's then crucial, because that makes you the expert. You get what you need, and they get the outcome they want.
So I'm interested then, have you kind of, again, the customer comes to you in your field, Ale, and have you had scenarios where they've come saying, I want this, and they're very specific. But actually, after you've gone through this process and really tried to understand, maybe the end result is actually quite different from what they originally envisioned.
Yes.
Does that happen?
Yeah, I had a client like that. One of the reasons was because I can also read a room. Like, you know, I have this empathetic side on me. Like, I meet you and I just get a feeling about you. And what she was visually showing me of what she wanted, I felt it didn't reflect her personality. And the more time we spent together, the more I was able to kind of pull that courageous side of her out. And it started off with a basic mood board, kind of driven by her ideas, but then I guided her through, and with my expertise, I helped her shape it and shape it and shape it, and it ended up being this creative explosion. And I would say up until today, probably the most creative home I've ever done. And in her statement saying, I just love what she did. I would have never had the courage to do this, and I'm so thankful that I trusted her. So I think that's also important, because the starting point can shift.
Yep. So there's got to be some level of flexibility in the process as well, right?
Yeah.
How do we account for that on the corporate side, Susana?
I mean, I think that the key point for flexibility here is, again, the iteration.
Yep.
I think that the best way to make corporate projects like this flexible is being able to just go back in the process in a systematic way, you know, not in an improvised way, which is very important to understand, because you do need to follow a methodology. But you also need to take into account that in each step of the process, you need like a wiggle space to just reconfigure and adapt what you're learning on real time, because none of these projects are the same. It depends on what real information you are exposing yourself to in a real time basis. So yeah, I think iteration is absolutely iteration in a structured way. I think it's the answer for flexibility in the corporate world.
Well, they have that phrase, don't they? Fail fast.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like a buzzword.
Exactly.
It's like
True.
agile and innovation.
True.
Great buzzwords, but there is actually a lot of substance behind some of these concepts.
But I think, you know, in your industry, in the same way in my industry, ultimately we're always trying to do something new, right? Innovation comes with newness, comes with an industry you haven't done before, a product you haven't done, a solution you haven't done. And even from a design point of view, you know, not everyone wants the same house. So often I'm doing things which I haven't done before. So I think from a planning point of view, account for this time, which allows you to kind of tweak and mold and go back. Often you're so pressured, or the timelines are so tight, that you don't allow the whole project to actually have this time for flexibility. I think that's also a big learning we had. You know, everyone wants everything yesterday, and it's just hard in the space of innovation and design, because you're constantly reinventing yourself and you're constantly tapping into something you actually don't know the outcome of.
Yeah, and that is a concept that's not natural for corporates, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's not natural at all, because corporates, obviously, in terms of costs, right, effort, and so many variables that need to to be considered for each of these projects. Well, obviously they limit a bit the flexibility to which you can actually address the project, because you have a limited amount of time, you have a limited team, obviously.
what's my ROI?
Exactly. Like you have KPIs on the table that are very non-flexible in that way. So it's hard sometimes to find that flexibility, but it's absolutely possible, and I think it's also very much needed, you know, because flexibility also guarantees how a bit of the success of the project. So you also need to have a bit of a flexible mindset there, right? And something I was going to say with relation to flexibility was also the to allow yourself to implement, to not plan ahead the tools that you're going to use. You know, because you can have a methodology, which is the structured one, and that you plan, but for each step there's a massive amount of tools that you could use creatively and that the project actually tells you they need to be used. It should be the project that lets you know which tools are better suited for the knowledge that you want to and the objectives that you want to accomplish in that single project. So having a creative mindset and an open mindset about which tools to use, I think it's a great way to make corporate projects more flexible.
Excellent.
I think one thing I wanted to add as well is I always leave one wall empty, or I don't shy away from leaving a wall empty, because I always say a house needs to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So if I fill that home for you and every single wall, I don't allow you to grow with it either. So if I leave that wall empty and you are traveling to Bali or not and you find this beautiful piece of art, I want you to have the opportunity to fill that with what you love doing, maybe in 6 months' time, and not necessarily everything now and now. So in the corporate world, of course, there is a start date and an end date, and everyone strives for perfection. But I do believe, again, also flexibility with allowing yourself to watch and observe, to try, and then go back after whatever time that is and revisit.
Yep.
Almost like, the piloting of what we did so much.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, so look, I've loved this. I can see so many parallels, and it's really not that different, from a specific one-to-one pure design aesthetic to what you can actually do from a corporate point of view. And I think there's parallels and learnings across both. I'm going to put you both on the spot for a second. I want to see if you have any ideas or products or solutions that have maybe come about in the last 10, 20 years that you think have really tapped into the concept or used customer insights really well, or maybe haven't. Are there any ideas, any thoughts? You can name names, it's fine.
Well, I can I can think, for example, of one which was the Google glasses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the Google Glass product? Do you know that one?
Yes.
So if you remember, it was kind of like a wearable smart glasses device that was launched. I think it was 2012 or 2013, something like that.
And it freaked everyone out.
Yes.
Freaked everyone out because it had a lot of hype and anticipation and etc. But however, amongst other technical problems and issues that it had, I think the battery was super bad and the price was also very high. But the most important problem or issue that it has is that Google disregarded social and privacy concerns with the product. So users felt very uncomfortable about being recorded without their consent or their knowledge in public spaces. So that's why some couple of years later it was discontinued. But it's I think it's a clear example of how Google and we're talking Google, right?
Yep.
Which is you would say a very customer-centric company. They absolutely underestimated the importance of empathizing with also societal norms and expectations of their customers.
100%. Ale?
I don't have a specific product, but just to go back to this, I think it comes back to assuming what someone wants without doing the necessary research or without asking the necessary questions, and then going to market too fast.
100%.
Right?
I think it's the conclusion of this conversation from my perspective is that from a corporate point of view, we should elicit an understanding of customers. Whatever those customers are, internal customers, external customers, we need to understand what it is that they feel, that they see, that they're understanding, to be able to design a product or a solution that is fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And that is the same whether it is a house, a room, a kitchen, whatever it may be, versus a solution that's going to thousands and thousands of consumers.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the principles are still the same. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for both of your time today. I've had a really great time. It's been super catching up with you both, and thank you so much. At GELLIFY, we are passionate about innovation. So if you're interested in learning more about anything that we've spoken about today or want us to help you on any of your journeys, don't hesitate to reach out to us.